huge patchwork in Gulf of Mexico. Evidently they are traces of huge engineering, but they defy mundane explanation. It's about 200 kilometers off the coast of Louisiana State. Maximum length is about 760 kilometers. The size is a little larger than Florida Peninsula. The seafloor of this vast area is covered with traces of tremendous engineering. The area is a patchwork tapestry of various regular hatching. The size of patches vary greatly, although the typical pattern is about 30 kilometers by 30 kilometers. One might think this has been made by the United States government, such as possibly Department of Transportation or Department of Defense. But that theory in turn calls for many inevitable questions. What is it for? How was it done? Have you ever heard of such project in Gulf of Mexico? Was it a secret project? When was it made? Is there any record on that? And so on. Firstly, it is certain that there were some huge engineering activities under the Sea of Gulf of Mexico sometime in history, although we have many unanswered questions about that. Secondly, it is very unlikely that they were accomplished by human beings, considering the huge scale of engineering. They simply surpasses the technological level of mankind by far. We human beings has no counterpart on the land, which is man's territory. It consists of many patches with some hatched patterns. The parallel lines of hatching run mostly north to south or east to west, but a few are diagonal. Each line appears to be a huge groove with a depth of at least tens of meters. And the important point is that parallel lines in a patch are so uniform that they seem to have been drawn together simultaneously. We have seen many parallel lines patterns in our seafloor archaeology from 1 to 9. But most of them are compressed square waves. That means, what looks like a hatched pattern turns out to be one single line folded at each side again and again without break. We call this pattern repetitive U-turn hatching. It's almost one-stroke hatching folded many times without break. Such traces simply suggest that something gigantic actually traveled exactly in that way, taking time to form such patterns. And now we have here another pattern of hatching. We could call it paint combing pattern. In this case, lines don't make U-turn at the side. They are simply parallel straight lines without U-turn. But lines are not drawn one by one separately. Just like real paint combing, many parallel lines seem to have been drawn simultaneously, covering a large area as if at one stroke. As a result, lines are perfectly parallel and regular. But this paint combing theory might be too naive. Theoretically, there is another one which is too mind-blowing to imagine. Laser machining is now so popular that it is applied in many current industrial fields. But most application is limited in indoor scale. And if it is developed greatly in terms of scale, it is mostly in the direction of micro and nano level. Irrespective of scale, hatched pattern is grooved by laser from the pointed head shuttling from one side to the other alternately. Beep, 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 beep. Like a printer. But theoretically speaking, it is not impossible to apply laser technology in the opposite direction, that is, outdoor scale. Laser technology applied to scales of 100 meter, 1 kilometer, 10 kilometers, that is, geographical scale. And it is quite feasible, at least theoretically. Here we need not to bind our imagination according to the current level of human technology, because we are talking about non-human or superhuman technology. Even if it is technically impossible for us human beings at present, it might be already a piece of cake for some intelligent races in the universe. And actually we might be witnessing here that is the case, here in Gulf of Mexico. The size of this patchwork tapestry is as large as a state of America. It's larger than Florida Peninsula. The area of this irregular shape is filled with hatched patches of geographical scale. The contours of states of America represent mere administrative convention, which correspond no physical entity. Unlike such nominal shapes, patchwork in the Gulf of Mexico is filled with artificial and geographical traces with regular uneven surface. On the land of Earth, there's no area this size with such physical regular patterns of geographical scale. Even if we don't know what it really is, it is clear that it doesn't belong to human civilization. We are obliged to conclude that it belongs to another civilization on Earth, which is quite alien to us. Possibly they must have known us for a long time, but we have been almost unaware of their existence. After all, we come back to the same question again and again. What is this for? It would have been a considerable investment even for a superhuman race to achieve this geographical scale patchwork. It could not have been accomplished in a few days. It must have taken several weeks or several months or even several years. And it must have been done with some huge machine operated by some intelligent beings according to some purposeful plan. So for what purpose was this patchwork made? Or exactly speaking, what are these traces? Still more exactly, what activity left these traces? There are always explanations thrown in first. In this case, it is visual message theory, which explains this patchwork as visual message or artistic expression like Nazca lines. It is too infantile to be discussed here. This theory always sees the world and the universe as an open picture book to be read readily. It's a no-brainer theory in this case. There is a serious and very promising sounding theory, and I call it mining theory. This theory insists that these traces are the result of mining of some valuable resources in the surface layer of seafloor. This sounds very convincing, all the more there are already similar projects by human beings in some places, but in far limited space. This theory is convincing because it explains the traces as a result of some purposeful activity. But even so, there still remain some points which are not resolved by the smart theory. This theory can't explain why the hatched patterns are so neat, why the direction of hatching varies. And from the beginning, why hatched patterns, which leave intervals untouched if the purpose is really mining. It's very unlikely that scientists such as oceanographers or marine scientists are not aware of this mysterious engineered traces. Then, why don't they mention this fact publicly? Have you ever heard that this oceanographic fact has been an issue among scientists? In Scientific American? National Geographic Magazine? Or Discovery Channel? How about Fox News? No, never. One possible explanation is that it is too relevant to our civilization, but is far beyond our understanding and nobody has come up with good explanation. It's an old book that is written in unknown language and was found on the dusty shelf in the basement. Nobody in the house can read it. Most scientists explain only what they can explain and piece them together to make the big picture as a whole, neglecting or covering up inconvenient facts. In order to know the relevant truth, we don't have to always refer to so-called scientists. They can be very unreliable, misleading, or even completely wrong when it comes to relevant and important matters. As long as the truth is concerned, it doesn't matter whether you're a professional scientist or not. You need not belong to so-called scientific communities to seek the truth. Professional scientists are not necessarily sincere truth seekers. Most of them work as scientists only for living in good position. Sincere truth seekers don't have to be professional scientists. Actually, most professional scientists are slaves of establishment. They are laboring for patching up obsolete paradigm which they themselves belong to and prosper on it. So they don't risk their living and status by meddling with potentially controversial issues. In fact, it's not professional scientists but laymen who are capable to accept extraordinary facts without prejudice. Outsiders are free from rigid established paradigms and can often see the relevant truth much earlier than professional scientists.